The Armenian Genocide was a horrific act of mass slaughter and deportation levied upon the innocent Armenians living in eastern Anatolia. Yet, like many genocides of the 20th century, it has been rendered to the dustbins of history. You may have noticed that this video was released on April 24th, Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day, assuming that this video comes out on time. At the end of the video, I will bring up some charities that you can donate to if you'd like to support the struggle of the modern Armenians. Although we can do nothing to change the past, we need to at least protect the future. A quick disclaimer before I continue. I'm trying to make as much of this video as factual as possible, without harnessing any opinions. If I see any baseless comments that are calling me biased and/or a liar, such as with the comments I am showing on the screen, then I will ignore you. Don't deface yourself on the internet. On to the video. The First World War was devastating on all accounts. It began with a rather unnecessary reaction. The dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on July 28th of 1914, a month after Austrian Archduke Francis Ferdinand was assassinated by a Bosniak Serb. The Austrians sent an ultimatum to the Serbians on July 23rd of 1914. The requirements were that the Serbian government would have to ban all anti-Austrian propaganda, work to expel all terrorist organizations within Serbia, no longer have open goals to seek reunification with all South Slavs, which was a problem for Austria as they held much territory filled with South Slavs. The army would have to be reformed for anti-Austrian soldiers to be purged, Serbia would be required to help in court proceedings, and Serbia would have to allow the Austrians to enter their country at any time to investigate. This last point was a huge problem, as it essentially denied the sovereignty of Serbia. What's interesting is that the Serbians were open to accept almost all of these points, and responded to the Austrian government by saying that they would accept every single one, except for the last one. The Austrians, now with an illegitimate casus belli, would break off ties with the Serbians and declare war soon after, just as their ally of the German Empire had wanted. Fast forward a few months and the Ottoman Empire joined the war on the side of the Central Powers. On October 29th of 1914, followed by a shelling of Russian ports. The Ottomans opened up many new fronts for the Entente, including, but not limited to, Anatolia, the Caucasus Mountains, Mesopotamia, Syria, and Palestine. After the First Balkan War, the Ottoman Empire had to severely reform their army, resulting in much less organized and much weaker troops being on the fronts during the Great War. At the start of the war, the Ottomans seek to conquer the Caucasus Mountains. They launched a full-scale winter offensive, believing that they would wipe out the entire Russian army stationed in the Caucasus. This so-called genius plan failed miserably. Due to many issues such as horrid weather conditions, rough terrain, logistical problems, and lack of heavy artillery being completely overshadowed by the Ottomans, they were severely outmatched. In addition, their new Minister of War, Enver Pasha, had no idea how to command an army. The offensive started on December 22nd and caught the Russian army off guard, though, after 2 weeks, they were stopped dead in their tracks and eventually pushed back. After their magnificent plan rolled out, their manpower decreased from around 118,174 men to a mere 42,000. And now we begin to see how the Armenians began to suffer. In the spring of 1915, the Armenians staged an uprising in the city of Van. The Committee of Self-Defense organized in Van, a city that used to have a substantial Armenian population. This was a culmination of rising tensions, as a result of Ottoman Turk oppression of Armenians, such as with the assassination of multiple important Armenian representatives, such as Ishkhan. It is reported that the first shots of the rebellion were fired on April 20th of 1915. The Armenians stormed through the city and began to tear down government offices and military barracks. Meanwhile, the Ottomans attempted to tear down buildings and strategic points so that it would be more difficult for the Armenians to win in guerrilla warfare. On May 4th of 1915, the Muslim citizens began to evacuate the city, alongside the Ottoman army. This rebellion would end on May 18th of 1915, when Armenians from the Caucasus volunteered to join the fight and help their brethren, storming the city with Russian troops right behind. The Russian Empire captured the city and established a governorate for the Armenians. Although the city would change hands sometimes during the rest of the war, this would instill even more fear and horror into the spirits of the Ottomans. Prior to the Armenian genocide, there were approximately 2.5 million Armenians living in eastern Anatolia. However, due to them being located within the Muslim Ottoman Empire, they would all be commonly oppressed throughout the beginning of the 20th century. This was partially due to the election of the Committee of Union and Progress, who were initially open to minorities, though over time they became more militant and less tolerant towards said minorities. This intolerance especially grew against Christians, with a devastating Ottoman loss in the First Balkan War. Remember the horrible Caucasus Offensive I mentioned earlier? It turns out that after a devastating loss, instead of blaming Pasha's horrible coordination, the Ottoman government ended up blaming the innocent Armenians. The previously mentioned resistance in Van resulted in the Ottomans coming up with even more false accusations on the Armenians. Not long after resistance started, the Ottoman Empire began to deport Armenians from their homelands in eastern Anatolia under a justification that their placement would threaten the Ottoman front line. The Turkish parliament would soon after pass a legislation authorizing this action, and Armenians would begin to be rounded up and removed from their homes throughout 1915. They would be taken from their homes and walked to Turkish concentration camps focused in the desert. In addition to this deportation, mass murder and massacre occurred on the Armenians' path, as Turkish, Kurdish, and Circassian locals slaughtered the innocents for no reason. The surviving Armenians had to endure horrors in the concentration camps, with one of the most common causes of death being starvation. This genocide would continue into 1916, with an estimated body count of over 1 million Armenians. The strangest part of this entire situation is that the Turkish government has refused to consider this a genocide, which is defined as the intentional killing of an ethnic or religious group. As I said near the beginning, I'm now going to mention some charities that you can donate to if you want to support the Armenian cause. There are a wide variety, but I'll mention two for now. These would be the Children of Armenia Fund and the Armenia Fund, respectively. In the future, I plan to make a video on the history of relations between the two countries of Armenia and Azerbaijan, in order to clear the murky waters. Anyway, my next video is going to be quite long, so don't expect it to be soon. Since summer's starting soon, though, I'll have more time to work on videos. As the world continues to fall apart, stay safe.